The experts I consulted in Salvador had no doubt that Tibra's pumping of sulfuric acid 2.5 kilometers out at sea, just 3 kilometers south of Arambepe, was affecting Atlantic waters to the north and the south. The yellow foam that was so obvious in Arambepe's ocean could be detected several kilometers up the coast. It may have affected yields as far away as Suipe. One marine biologist attributed a series of recent seagull deaths to Tiber's pollution and thought the effects of pollution would soon begin to show up in fish. Arambeperos complained only about declining yields. They hadn't noticed deformities in the fish they caught. The problem of ocean pollution seemed less immediate than the lagoon scandal of 1973, because the ocean is much vaster and destruction takes longer to show up. Still, many tourists will eventually conclude that bathing in Arambepe is unhealthy. Evidence for contamination of fish and of the people who eat them can be predicted. Tiber's pollution probably has played a role in the changing fishing pattern, even as the factory has also changed the local economy by providing jobs for villagers, much more than in 1973 when its attitude seemed to be, let Arambepe be damned. The Tibers of 1980s and beyond had worked hard to improve its local image. Providing well-paying jobs for young men who had finished junior high school, the titanium oxide factory Tibras, 5 kilometers from Arambepe, employed 40 Arambeperos in 1980. After fishing, factory work just exceeded business and construction as the second most common male job. Most villagers working for Tibras had unskilled positions: kitchen work, gardening, sweeping, and cleaning. The factory's public relations head told me that Tibras gave preference to locals for such menial work. Most of the skilled workers were bused from Salvador. The public relations man said that since 1974 he'd been working with a German priest in Abrantes, the district seat, which is almost as close to Tibras as Arambepe is. Their aim was to provide better education for local children so they might one day fill higher paying jobs. The public relations man complained about the cost of bringing 800 workers from the city. 18 busloads came each day for the shift that began at 8 o'clock and ended at 4. One company plan for cutting gasoline and bus maintenance costs was to build near Abrantes a new town with 400 2 and 3 bedroom houses. Workers' purchase of these dwellings would be financed by Tibras. The aim was to get skilled workers to move closer to the factory. The reputation of Tibras has improved substantially since 1973, mainly because of the services it has provided for nearby communities. As noted, the factory worked with the priest to improve the school in Abrantes, the base of his parish. Although educational opportunities had improved in Arambepe, where there were now competently staffed elementary and junior high schools, certain subjects, physics for example, were taught only in Abrantes. Twice each week, Tibras bused over 100 children from the Arambepe area to study physics in Abrantes. The factory provided several other services, although Arambepe now had its own medical post where a physician from Salvador spent 2 days a week. Villagers preferred the medical care available at Tibras. 2 doctors worked at the factory each weekday morning and 1 in the afternoon. Registered nurses covered the lighter shifts from 4 p.m. to midnight and from midnight to 8. The Tibras medical staff treated not just factory employees but any local resident. In theory, the Tibras clinic was for emergencies, but in fact people went there with routine maladies. In extreme emergencies, factory vans had taken physicians to nearby villages, and an ambulance was available to take people to hospitals in Salvador. Phone service had not yet reached Arambepe by 1980, but came soon after. Meanwhile, a token-operated phone stood at the corner of the highway and the turnoff to Tibras. When it wasn't working, phone calls to the city and even long-distance when it wasn't working, phone calls could be made free of charge in the factory. Still sensitive to the water pollution issue, Tibras had a faucet outside its gates where anyone could get purified water certified as drinkable by the state health department. The public relations officer I talked with explained that the lagoon problem had been solved by treating factory waste and sending them out to sea. Pipes now extended out 2.5 kilometers in the ocean and reached a depth of 30 meters. He downplayed the current marine pollution problem, but told me of the company's plan to end the pollution potential once and for all by using tankers to carry waste 12 to 15 kilometers out to sea. Publicity about its community service was a major part of the Tibras campaign to improve its image. Factory tours were also available, and I found the public relations official I interviewed very cooperative. The factory itself was a world apart, its security maintained by armed guards. To enter, one had to leave a passport or identity card. Aaron Beperos warned me to wear long pants. Shorts, the usual male dress in Aaron Beppe, weren't permitted. Once inside, I was impressed by the physical plant. Gardens made the inner courtyards attractive. Workers could even do their banking here. I passed a lunchroom where a waiter in white shirt and bow tie was setting out slices of melon, fried fish, and abundant quantities of rice. Decorative plates, vases, and clean tablecloths contributed to the pleasant atmosphere. Next door was an activity room where workers could play pool. Some men played checkers at a table outside. No sulfur waste or job hazards intruded on this comfortable ambiance. They belonged to another part of the plant. I was passing the area where workers could relax. Aaron Pepero Jamie, an old friend of the anthropological teams of the 60s, a boy of 8 when I first met him in 1964, was now a married man and a semi-skilled Tebris worker. Jamie's mother had died when he was 2, and his father had remarried, leaving Jamie and his brother to be raised by an ancient great-aunt. Anthropologist Carl Withers, who led the Columbia University Brazil team in 1963, had found Jamie charming and bright. Knowing that Jamie's chances of being educated were poor without outside support, Carl sent money for years to pay for Jamie's education in Salvador. My 1980 trip gave me a chance to see the results of Carl's support. Jamie had studied beyond junior high school and held a Tebris position for which he received more than $300 per month, including double pay for overtime. Jamie had worked for Tebris for 5 years. He had married in 1979, legally and in a religious ceremony, and was the father of a month-old boy. Because of his good education, Jamie had never been a grade 1 worker, this category in which most Aaron Beperos were employed, including unskilled custodial tasks. Still, even the grade 1 salary, $115 to $150 per month, was twice the minimum wage. Grade 2, in which Jamie had begun, paid $215 monthly. The highest positions, grade 4, paid a monthly salary of $500 to the most skilled workers. Some also received special pay for hazardous work, and wage indexing provided between 1 and 3 inflation raises annually. Jamie seemed neither pleased nor displeased with the nature of his work. Like Aaron Beppe's 40 other Tebris workers, Jamie went to work each day in vans sent from the factory. He usually worked the daytime shift, but sometimes chose to make double pay from night work. The benefits of Tebris employment showed up in his lifestyle. The good company lunches were obvious in his girth. His new brick house in Carunas, now a more respectable neighborhood than in 1973, had a refrigerator, a black and white TV, gas stove, and bathroom. His plumbing system awaited running water. His well would be finished soon. When I visited his house, his well-dressed wife was ironing with an electric iron on a real board, novelties never seen in Aaron Beppe in the past when women had ironed on tabletops using charcoal stuffed irons. Jamie had become an investor and a consumer. He had bought some land and was looking for a car. He asked me about cost of particular models. He knew that a used Volkswagen Beetle could be had for about $1,500. He had bought his refrigerator for the equivalent of $250 and his television for half that. Jamie earned less than the owners of the most productive boats did, but his work was less risky than fishing. His salary was regular, with protection against inflation. His fringe benefits included good retirement, widow and child benefits, and disability insurance. Nor was Jamie's income reduced by tax. No one in Aaron Beppe pays income tax, he contended. No one makes enough money. He was wrong about that, but right that no villager paid. Although income tax was deducted from Jamie's wages, he could file for reimbursement in Salvador since his salary was below the taxable level. Thinking that anyone could get their tax payment back in this way, he saw taxation as a functionless bother. Like other villagers, Jamie knew much more about the outside world than previously. He asked me about strikers in Poland and about the 1980 presidential election in the United States. He had followed news of strikes in Sao Paulo, but reported no union activity or strikeable grievances at Tebris or the Salvador area. Like a few other villagers, Jamie had moved into the upper working class. His lifestyle contrasted sharply with that of most fishermen. Aaron Bepero saw Tebris as they had viewed the National Oil Company in the 1960s as a step up. This became apparent one Sunday afternoon when 2 villagers, a captain owner and a skilled Tebris employee, tried to involve me in their argument about the value of Tebris versus fishing as a profession. "I'm proud to have a better job than my father," said Pedro, the Tebris worker. "I wanted to be better educated than my father, just as he wanted to have a better education than his father. Don't you want your children to do better than you?" Walter, a captain owner, provided the counterpoint. You may be doing well at Tibris, but it's bad for Arambepe. The fish are leaving and they are dying. Pedro argued that fishing would eventually end in Arambepe and that the new economy was better. His grandfather, he said, had been a fisherman, but he would have been proud of Pedro for advancing himself. Fishing is unskilled work. Anyone can catch a fish. Walter defended his work. Here's my card showing I'm a professional fisherman. Do you have such a card? He asked Pedro. His will to defend the fishing profession, enhanced by several beers, Walter insisted on the value of his work. I'll take you out of my boat tomorrow. Let's see if you catch anything. Let's shake on it. They never shook, and Pedro seemed unconvinced. Though he ended the discussion peacefully, contending he had nothing against fishing, some of his best friends. Tibris had influenced behavior, lifestyles, values, and opinions in Arambepe in many ways. Villagers, not just those employed by the factory, relied on Tibris for service and for jobs. Arambeperos sold prepared food to the workers who came each morning from Salvador. They got the business of Tibris employees in their bars and restaurants, and some hired out their boats and labored to lay pipes for Tibris on the ocean floor. Although Tibris had restored the lagoon and been forgiven for the scandal, tourism and fishing, two major components of the local economy, remained vulnerable to pollution. So did the health of Arambeperos and other Bahamians, from rural people in small coastal settlements to diners at elegant seafood restaurants in Salvador, which bought some of the fish caught offshore from Arambepe and its neighbors. Tibris had filled the gap left when the National Oil Company stopped hiring Arambeperos because they lacked secondary educations. Much more accessible, Tibris worked to improve the education of local people, to stock a cost-effective pool of laborers close by. Still, as I listened to Jamie talk of television and Volkswagens, I wondered what Carl Withers, now dead, would have thought if he could have seen what his investment in Jamie's education had wrought. A contented, well-fed factory worker with an all-American appetite for consumer goods. Jamie's story may be one of the happier chapters in the assault on paradise, but it does provide one more illustration of Arambepe's dependence on external forces and of the quickening erosion of cultural differences. Taxes, government forms, pensions, and national wage indexing are all aspects of the increasing presence of the state in local life. The impact of Brazilian nationhood, particularly on Arambepe's public health and family life, is the subject of Chapter 9.